Hi, I'm Sifu Kuttel, and in this video, we're going to be working with the Tai Chi Jian. So grab your sword, and let's get to work. As we get into this technique, there's actually two things that I want you to keep in mind. And this is something that will go into another video that I have about low tapping techniques. And this just goes as a rule of thumb. And this is not going to be a universal rule, but in most cases, when you're doing a tapping technique with a bow stance, it's going to be a high tap. So target-wise, we could hit towards the arms, we could hit towards the hands, but I really want you to think of going straight in and tapping to the face. This will change the trajectory of the emphasis and the energy of your sword attack. So when you're tapping, you're not necessarily thinking of diving down with the blade, but rather trying to extend as far as you can forward. And I want you to keep that in mind. This is going to be, in most cases, in Taiji forms. There are some techniques where we are going to tap low in a bow stance. But it's also very specifically said that it's a low tap towards the knee. But in most cases, if you're doing a bow stance, it's going to be a high tap. Now, when it comes to Cartwheel Sword, we have an excellent application here. This is a parrying technique into a counter cut. So we will break it down step by step by step. We'll have position 1, position 2, position 3, and so on. But as you get more and more comfortable with this, try to blend it together. This is something that you want to think of, like in the name Cartwheel Sword. This should be moving on a straight path. This is almost as if we have a wheel next to us. We're not really necessarily trying to go across and make these big figure 8 motions or have diagonals, but rather we want to have a nice wheel next to our body after we parry. Now you'll see how this all works out. So grab your sword and let's get to it. Let's begin at the end. We're going to place our focus on the last part of this technique, the actual martial part, and that's this tapping technique in a bow stance. We have same foot forward, we have a nice lunge forward, and a good tap up high. You want to think about hitting to the face on this one. Now, inherently, we have a block and a rotation of the sword, so a parrying motion. And the best way to think of this is if an opponent is coming in with a thrust, I'm bringing my blade across, blocking with the flat of the blade, and then a quick rotation to flip over and then attack and counterattack my opponent. So this becomes very fluid and in one motion. But I really want to break this one down into a couple of motions. So let's start with the bow stance forward. My sword is in my right hand, my right foot is forward, my left hand is sword finger position. I'm just going to bring it back to my hip just to keep it out of the way. You can rest it nice and comfortable behind the back, or you could even touch it to your wrist, but I prefer that you keep it out of the way of the sword at this point. Now, we're simply going to start with the blade forward, and then I want you to take the blade and let the tip drop downward. Now, your thumb should be pointing down. It should be in this nice relaxed position. This is our first position. Okay, so again, we're starting blade up, blade down, tip forward again, and then blade down. Now we're going to bring it back. Okay, don't necessarily have to think of a big scoop here. It's just a continuation. You'll notice as you relax and you follow, let the blade move by itself, it'll naturally come back to this position. However, once we reach here, more or less horizontal, even a little bit before, it's okay to start this. We're going to rotate our hand so now our palm is facing outward. This is important because this leads the blade edge for us to do our cut. Okay, so again, thumb points down. We have position 1, position 2, rotate. Again, we'll start with the blade out. 1, 2, rotate. Now from here, I'm just going to continue the motion, continue this circle. The blade's going to come up, and then I'm going to end up extending forward to tap. Now notice my hand is in the correct position for a good tapping technique, good comfortable cut, and I have accomplished that full circle. So again, we can start from here. 1, 2, rotate, 3. Again, 1, 2, rotate, 3. If I'm facing towards you, you can see as I bring the blade down from 1, 2, it's right next to my body. I flip it over, and the plane of motion is very similar to like a propeller. We have a nice circle right next to our body. I'm not trying to bring it way out to the side and come back with a diagonal cut. From this position, I should just be able to flip the blade over in the single motion and strike. Now let's try this with a step forward. So this time, we're going to start with feet together. I'm going to bring my position 1, and I'm going to touch my wrist. So now I can focus on actually blocking with the blade. You'll notice if we are using this as a block, my hand is going to be up higher. So my hand should be at about head level here if I'm using the blade to actually parry a thrusting attack towards my body. Okay, so I meet it here. Now, once I touch here, position 1, I start going for position 2. I'm going to step, rotate, and then finish position 3, or striking, and I have my finger up and sword finger pointing forward. Okay, so again, from my feet together, 1 blocks across, 2 is just going to come back and rotate, step out, and tap. Again, 1, 2, rotate, tap. And then we're going to make it more fluid. 1, 2, 3. Again, 1, 2, rotate, 3. If I'm facing towards you, nice block, tap. Again, block next to the body and tap. Now, really, this is the technique itself. So if you get comfortable with this, we can even take a step forward with our left foot for our first position. So now my left foot steps forward. Notice I already have my toes turned. I want to make sure I have them pivoted out to the side, allowing me to really step into this one and finish with the technique. Okay, so I can turn my upper body, I can get my hips turned into it. So now my left foot steps, 1, 2, turn the wrist, 3. Again, 1, 2, 3. And then nice and smooth in the motion, 1, 2, 3. Again, if I'm facing more towards the corner, 1, 2, 3. Now, once you're comfortable with this, we'll just start with our leg up higher. And we'll start with our sword up higher. So we'll have the blade come up and pointing straight forward. Okay? So we'll have this position with our arms. I'm bringing my blade across to my right side. Sword fingers touching at the wrist. And I lift my left leg. Now it's that same step. 1, 2, step, 3. Nice and easy, okay? So again, sword is up. I raise my leg. 1, 2, 3. One more time. Leg up. 1, 2, 3. Now if I'm going towards this corner, my leg is up, holding the sword up. 1, 2, 3. Nice and easy. Again, sword is up. 1, 2, 3. I get that nice tap at the end. Okay? Now, as you're doing this tap, I want you to think of you cut into an apple, but not all the way through, and it's stuck on the tip of your sword. So when you roll it over, we're trying to fling it off of the sword. We're not trying to cut all the way through. So really avoid trying to do anything like this. As we're doing this, keep a forward motion. Fling that apple forward as you tap the blade forward and a little bit downward. All right, so there you have it. Now, again, keeping these positions defined really helps make sure that the path of the sword travels correctly next to the body without creating any extra or awkward angles or motions, as well as really make sure that you have the proper position for that last cut. So again, the parrying technique, we're using the flat of the blade. This is an ideal, and this is mainly how Chinese swordsmanship was taught, is to use the flat of the blade to block and not the edge. And of course, all of the variables in combat are going to change that. We may have a chance where we end up meeting edge to edge, but it shouldn't be on purpose. The ideal should be blocking and parrying with the flat of the blade. From there, we'll continue all the way through into that counter cut, and this is a really, really useful technique. It can be used against a lot of different attacks, but when you're beginning to do this and when you're first learning the technique, I want you to think of it as a straightforward thrusting attack. And then when we take it from the context of cartwheel sword, where our leg is up, we have the sword up above us. This is a big exaggerated motion to teach you how to really get good upper body and waist rotation to help aid in that quick parry, and then follow up with a good extension, same hip forward, same shoulder forward for our tapping technique. So we have really, really good extension to reach our opponent. I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and I'll see you in the next.